Welcome to Behind the Dub, the podcast series talking to voice actors about their experiences in the industry, as well as the shows they work on. Just before we start, I'd like to ask that if you like what you hear, please consider liking, subscribing, following, or commenting. This all means a lot to me, and it can help make more episodes happen in the future.
You know, when you least expect it, Brooklyn comes to play.
That's absolutely fine. So you are from New York, then?
I am from New York.
IMDb does not lie, then. Well, okay, it does lie occasionally.
Born on Manhattan Island at the I think closed St. Vincent's Hospital. I was raised for the better part of my childhood out on Eastern Long Island, in Huntington Station, New York, specifically Huntington Station, because that's where you lived if you didn't have a ton of money.
Huntington, I think I've been there.
Yeah, it's named for its proximity to the train station, which is both convenient and low income. But
yes, we have. Yeah, me and my husband have been there. We've actually been in that area. We've been there.
Great village. By the way, as far as towns on Long Island go, it's one of the best. I mean, a lot of them you and this might go for a lot of the United States. I don't know. I haven't traveled around the US that much, but a lot of towns will just be like a street, like one main street with stores on either side. And Huntington always had this like a full-on proper grid with everything going on.
Yeah, we've been there. It was quite nice.
Yeah, I got to Manhattan again. Found my way back for university, and then I ended up I did a brief stint living up in the Heights, Washington Heights, tip of Manhattan, and spent way more years living out in Brooklyn, all over the place. At a certain point, just to like full transparency, because I know at some point someone's going to hit me up and be like, "You didn't grow up in Brooklyn. How dare you rep Brooklyn?" But at a certain point, I do the math and I realize I've spent most of my life there. That's the culture and the vibe that I've integrated with the most. It's the place that I identify with, and it's the place that's kind of defined, most of my adult life. Plus, I claim points for the fact that I was born in the city. But yeah, I fucking love, there we go. We're starting with the curses. I fucking love
it's fine.
Brooklyn. I love New York. I like to say anywhere I go, like no matter where I live, if I'm in Dallas, if I'm in LA, I'm always repping New York.
That's absolutely wonderful. So you are a voice actress. You are a, is it ADR writer, or you just call yourself a writer?
I'm still sort of tiptoeing around the term writer. Because I think that oftentimes that is sort of associated with creating original work, but yeah, writer, I guess. I do ADR script writing. That was something I was self-taught on. It was actually I moved down here to start properly, and we can get into the backstory, but to skip ahead momentarily, I moved down here originally saying from the start that I wanted to do that as a side gig, because I don't know if you've had any of your guests tell you this, but animation voiceover does not pay a whole lot.
How many of my guests have said that? Nearly all of them.
You need something to be able to pay the bills if you're not, exclusively constantly working commercial and promo gigs and some of the higher paying stuff. So that's why, that's part of why I think a lot of us find our way into other aspects of the creative world. I think there are kind of two reasons, and it really depends on your motivations. For me, I was trained in a whole theater approach. My upbringing, my dad worked in technical theater his entire professional life as a technical director, and so 20 plus years at the Public, the New York Shakespeare Festival, working under George Wolfe and Joseph Papp before him. So I grew up playing on stages and throwing things out of third store New York City windows and having the police come into the building and trying to figure out who is potentially causing damage to the city. So when during my upbringing, I was trained in stagecraft and directing and stage design and lighting and sound. I went to a high school where a very large amount of emphasis was placed on learning every aspect of it. And to that end, the director of the theater department would frequently encourage / force people who were very frequent actors to try stage managing, to try lighting, to try design, to be there to build the set and strike it. Not just like the typical high school experience of like you help take down the set at the end of play weekend, but like actually be there to construct it and build it. And then rotate. So if you were stage managing or doing sound, you weren't on stage that season. And then similarly, she would frequently devious, amazing woman that she was, she would frequently poke the career techies and stage managers and end up pressuring them into being on stage and let them explore that too.
Just get out there. Go on.
my love of doing all aspects of the art is because I want to be as neck deep in it as possible. But the fact is, and this isn't a value judgment, a lot of people need to make ends meet. And so you will have people that want to end up directing or engineering or doing some other aspect of it, just because those are usually the gigs that give you full-time hours and help you pay your bills in a way that acting doesn't. That was a long answer. How is that?
No, this is perfect. Absolutely fine. Don't worry. I said it's really, really interesting to see how many voice actors, because some people just get this impression that voice actors are only voice actors, and then people don't seem to realize that you have your, as you said, fingers in many different pies all over the show. And so you wrote, because I know this because I watched it recently, is Don't Toy Me, Miss Nagatoro.
I did.
And there's currently 3 episodes of it out on Crunchyroll. Not sponsored, but it's on Crunchyroll.
Not sponsored.
I'm not sponsored yet. Crunchyroll, if you're listening or would like a sponsor, I would happily do it. But it's a really, really funny show, and comedy can be really difficult to write.
Oh my goodness, I'm so happy to hear.
Oh, yeah, it's really fun. At first, I'm not too sure on this, but now a couple episodes, it's like, yeah, no, I like this. This is really fun. It's a bit of slice of life. It's a bit honest. It's not too crazy. It's crazy, but not.
It takes a bit of a turn, doesn't it? And one of the things I noticed, because one of the first things I do since the sub came out almost a proper year before the dub, was I start to watch the episodes. Excuse me, and I start to read and watch reviews. I watch people's YouTube videos breaking down the series and kind of get a sense of what people like about the show, what they might have been frustrated with about the show, where they thought the show could have done better, and also the things that they appreciate about the arc. And one of the things that I saw in a number of places, a common thread, was that the show, and this isn't leading into some brilliant change I made, but one of the things that I noticed was a common thread was that a lot of people felt the show starts out really hard hitting, and depending on who you are, you might not like Nagatoro. She's brutal and
she's intense. Yes, very intense. Yeah.
And some people will say, that sets up the growth of their relationship, and you need to kind of hit it hard so that you can kind of see that change. I think it really hits really hard in the first episode or two, but something that surprised and delighted me about the series is that over the course of even just one season, and even further if you start reading the manga, my goodness, is it a beautiful, slow build to their relationship. And even just episode by episode, you start to see those little moments where she starts to soften, or where he starts to find his courage. And it's almost on an episode by episode basis that you can track these little tiny moments of growth for the characters. And I freaking love that about the show.
You definitely saw it in episode, it's episode 3. And they're at the, they're in the cafeteria, and Hachi has no other seats. It's like, there's only one there. And so it's a bit of playful toying. And then when the other girls start poking, goes, I want to touch your hair. It's like, no, you don't. She starts to get really, really defensive. I'm like, hang on, no, she really does like him.
Yeah, there's a little bit of territorialism happening that you didn't expect. And even he notices that by wondering, why is she defending me suddenly? This is the girl that bullies me. And also, why, not to spoil too much, but why do I see her not giving that same attention to other people? Why does she shut down in the face of other male attention, but she comes at me so hard?
And that was definitely what made me sort of go, oh, there's definitely something to this series, and there's definitely something she's not just a psycho, for need of better words. She's not just this crazy person. No, she's got a heart. She does actually care. It might have started off as a bit of teasing fun, but she's got something going on. And he also said it's also really funny that one of the bits that made me and my husband chuckle was it Big Boob Vampires Volume 10 or whatever was the manga, and it's just like, I didn't know there was boobs in it. It's just like, really? No, really?
Oh, is that episode 2?
I believe. Hang on.
I'm going to give you
the synopsis here. Yeah, I think it is episode 2.
I'm going to give you a little insider. information.
You got your wish, Senpai. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Oh, and this is the wrong show. You're not allowed to see that show.
I'm
going to give you a little insider information that's not particularly insider, because you could literally just flip on the sub and then turn on subtitles to see. But what did we have as that? It was not that far off. It was my computer's being a jerk. So what was that originally? I think it was it was always Big Boob Vampires. I couldn't wait to buy Big Boob Vampires. I bought it on my way to school, and I think we turned it into Big Boob Vampires Volume 10. I saw it on my way to school and knew I had to have it. I'll tell you something. I'm so grateful for the reception the show has had. And I know at the end of the day, most people are looking at the cast, but I was so worried because I knew how big a show this was when they handed it to me. So it was simultaneously a tremendous honor that they would pick me to carry that show, but also terrifying because I know that there were a lot of things people were particularly passionate about. And I know that it will get a lot more attention and focus because it's a more popular show. And so don't tell my employers this, but I put a lot of hours into that show. I spent a lot of time poring over every line of every episode, trying to polish the hell out of it because I'm someone who, and maybe it's the theater training in me, and I'm going to sound like a super big elitist right now, but I'm someone who listens to performances, and I'm usually sitting there with my director's hat rather than my actor's hat. And I'm thinking, God, that line was awkward. That didn't make sense. That's not a natural thing to say. Oh, that read sounded a little bit like narration rather than feeling. I don't hear you thinking. I don't hear you. And so I have those director thoughts first and foremost when I start to look at the work. And so the last thing I want to do is deliver something that reads as stilted and doesn't sound like natural human dialogue, especially when the comedy is so fast paced. I knew that at least to the best of my ability, every line had to be a banger. And so, I think, and don't look this up, don't find this person, but I noticed when I was first working on it, I started just sort of, I think we call this vanity searching, but I started looking up the show and getting people's opinions on it. And I found one tweet in particular that I'll probably paraphrase that said something along the lines of, the Nagatoro dub will either be legendary or a complete dumpster fire. There's no in between.
Oh, no.
And so to me, that's like, okay, challenge accepted. I want to make sure that whether you love it or hate it, everything was intentional. And so nothing warms my heart more than when I see people having passionate responses to the episodes, both positive and negative, because oftentimes if I've done my job right, I know that whatever they're reacting to was a choice on my part, not an accident or a mistake in most cases. So if someone particularly loves a delivery or a line, that's often because my pen was behind it. And similarly, I've seen a couple of people that'll point out things and say, oh my God, this was so cheesy. That was such a bad joke. I hate that. I can't believe they did that. And I'm like, nice. I made you feel something.
I will say of the dub cast, because I'll say about the show. I hadn't heard of the show until you tweeted about it, because I followed you on Twitter. Yeah, I didn't. I only when you tweeted about it, it's just like, oh, there's a dub of this show. Okay, well, that looks fun. And that's when I started looking into it. I didn't hear of it until.
Had you seen The Girl?
No.
Okay, because there was, and it might happen on specific corners of the internet, but there definitely was a phase back in, I want to say like every day is the same now that we're in the pandemic, but like somewhere between 2019 and 2020, there was a phase where the manga became really popular. And so I at least noticed that like I couldn't look anywhere on Twitter without seeing pictures of Hayase.
Okay, yeah, I'm not quite in those circles, shall I say, but I've never. But I will say that her name escaped me. Hang on, Kimberly Ann Campbell. She is really good. I will really love how she. I really love how she does, because I tend to lean towards a dub than a sub. Unless there's no dub, then I will watch the sub. That's how I roll, and I really do think she just absolutely nails the character. It doesn't feel off. It's just like, nah, you've got this. And
Eric,
is it Hachi? It's Eric Scott. Sorry, I'm terrible. Eric Scott. Is it Kiana? Yeah, he's really good. Playing.
Kimura.
yeah, he's also really good as well. And it's like, yeah, no, I can believe that it's very believable. And also with the writing being as good as it is, and I'm not saying it just because you're here. I really think the writing's pretty good, because comedy writing can be really, really difficult, especially when you're trying to translate something that's not necessarily going to make sense in English. If you translate it straight out, you have to take what's there and change it and make it and still make it funny and land. From the 3 episodes I've seen, and you said you've done the whole series. You did
whole
the whole
show
season.
Is written. I'll say that right now. Whole show is written. So if you ever get the inclination to think that that they've backpedaled and catered to some whim that happened on Twitter, it didn't. The show is in.
The show is already done. But yes, and I think you've done a really exceptional job. And
Thank you so much.
Go on,
please.
Well, what I was going to say is my first introduction to your work was Dragon Ghost Mouse Hunting. It's what started this particular show, and
you did mention that when you reached out.
Yeah, it's what started the show. It's not what this whole thing's about. It just happens to be that I've talked to a lot of people who happen to be on the show, and so now talking to you, I've now talked to pretty much the whole Arena gang. We had Eli Farmer and I had George P. Yeah, so basically all that episode, other than the Skeleton Bros, I've talked to everyone. I've got to get the Skeleton Bros, but pretty much I talked to all the principal cast. So you were Cassandra, and I really like Cassandra.
Thank you so much. Well, if I can cap off one more thing about Nagatoro.
Yeah,
I will say this. I think that I wanted to just agree with you that I thought the cast was doing absolutely outstanding work. I love the work that both Kimberly and Eric, as well as Lily and Brittany are doing. I think everyone sounds phenomenal so far. I was definitely worried. I know that it's a very fast-paced show, and oftentimes, we are encouraged as writers, because it makes the process easier, to try and keep everything to a really specific tempo, so everything is really predictable. And something I noticed really quickly was that one, the dialogue was going to have to be fast. And 2, for some of the jokes to land, it was going to have to vary. There were going to have to be lines where it's delivered rapid fire and lines where it's drawn out and kind of like a twist of the knife, which means you're starting to break some of those like common rules of writing anime dubbing. I mean, one of the things we rely on when we're desperately looking between the screen and the script is that we can sort of anticipate what the tempo is going to be. And this throws that right out the window. It leans towards fast. And so something I certainly had concerns about was that I was delivering a script that would be a tongue twister every session the actors went in. But they've handled it really well. The characterizations are great. I'm so excited to see more and more as it comes out. And just to complete entirely self-serving for a minute, I sincerely hope people enjoy it. 2, I sincerely hope they pick me up for season 2, because I would love to stay in command of this show. So unless you all hate it, in which case get rid of me.
I don't hate it. I want more. Is it the usual 12 run, I'm guessing, for this?
It is a 12 run.
A 12 run.
I believe a season 2 has been announced, so I'm kind of like crossing my fingers on that front, but we haven't seen it hit in the J yet.
And is there any particular episode that was your favorite of Nagatoro?
Oh my goodness. Yeesh. No, I don't.
You like they're all your children. You love them all.
I honestly don't think so. I will say this. Initially the inspiration for Nagatoro. I adored writing her character because she struck me as this kind of weird hybrid between, like Tiny Tina meets
Borderlands.
Max from Sam and Max.
Yeah.
If anyone remembers Sam and Max.
I do.
Yay. I got something in my eye. Well, why don't you stick a fork in it? It always works for me. But I quickly fell in love with Gamma and Yoshi. They're like my Beavis and Butthead. Yoshi is adorable. I probably took the most risks with Yoshi, so I'm very fascinated to see how people like her. Yoshi's an interesting character because in the manga, she does one thing, and that's repeats everything the person before her said. Every time someone says something, an example would be like, "Oh my God, you've got paint all over your hands." And she would go, "Your hands, ha 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 ha." I'm going to go get a snack. I'm hungry, hungry, hungry. And that's basically her one note. And it's cute on the page, but it was something that I found struggled to translate to a medium like this, like anime. And one, it eventually becomes stale on screen. It's not fun for the actor. And eventually it kind of loses its flavor for the audience. And so I had to find a way to solve what I called like the Yoshi problem, which is honor the spirit of the character, which is she is the ultimate follower. She always supports and backs up and is the ultimate like groupie follower to her best friends. And she's not that bright. And so I find ways to honor that initially come off as a similar sort of, instead of just saying, your hands, or, yes, I know. It kind of becomes a similar sense of like, I know, right? He does though, doesn't he though? Those kind of things. Yeah. And then as we get later into the show, I start to, you'll see, I start to throw her some very bizarre curveballs where it's like this lady has clearly lost the plot and she thinks she's agreeing with everyone, but she just said something that no one will understand. And I hope people like that. If they don't like that, I completely understand. It's probably the biggest change I've made. Gammo is me. And that's not me saying like, I wish I could play this character, but more so than any character I've written so far, that's my personality. That's my sense of humor. Everything that comes out of Gammo's mouth is me. And so I guess to come all the way around to your actual question, if I had to pick, I guess as we get into the final episodes 10 to 12 would probably be the closest to my favorite, because that's when we have the most screen time for everybody. The cast kind of starts trading in and out and we have a lot of group interaction. They also introduced the president character, the president of the art club, who's very near and dear to my heart. It's an archetype that's like in the center of my wheelhouse. So as I'm writing, I'm kind of writing a character that, that falls within my range. And so I put a lot of time and care into that character, but also introducing a character 10 episodes later, I have to find a way to make her fit in and make her energy intersect with and have play with the rest of the cast. And so that was an interesting challenge. And I think once all Senpai, Gammo, Yoshi, Nagatoro, Sakura, and Sana, you don't know her name yet. I think once you've got all the 6 of them on screen at the same time interacting, I think that makes for some of the most interesting moments in the story.
I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops because now I'm watching the dub. I'm only watching solely the dub. I'm not going to watch the sub to see what happens. No, I'm watching the dub as it goes on. Because I'm starting to watch it as a dub.
and come not to hog the mic and make this the entire thing a friggin' Nagatoro episode, but that was the other thing I wanted to come around and say was the follow-up I forgot was I love the work that the whole cast has been doing, and it's a really tough act to follow because, I won't hold you. The Japanese cast is brilliant. And so that's a tremendously hard act to follow. And I think that the English cast is doing a great job.
So I was going to ask, what do you sort of prefer? Do you prefer sub, dub, or you kind of like whichever? It doesn't really bother you?
It depends. I think most of the time I prefer dub because it's the medium I work in. When I first moved down here, I was frequently gaming with a group in a game called Vindictus, which is a game I adore. It's one of the best combat systems you'll ever find in a video game. I'm just saying. And my clan in that game gave me the weirdest farewell. Not that I was leaving. Like the moment I landed in Texas, I could hop on Skype and we could chat together. But I told them that I was moving to Dallas. I was going to pursue a career in voiceover. I wanted to work in anime. And their farewell to me was to tell me, we prefer subs. And so I sort of, stubbornly, and I feel like I've kept that energy to this day, have kind of taken the approach of like, okay, well, I hope I get to change your mind. And so, because it's the work that I do and the medium I'm passionate about, I absolutely prefer the dubs. I'm very critical of the dubs, which, again, I think that comes down to having had a background in writing and directing training as well. I'm always wearing my director hat instead of my actor hat, which is a note that my coaches are always giving me that I need to like throw that away once I'm in the booth. There are a couple of shows, and I probably shouldn't name them for fear of insulting the English casts, but there are a couple of shows that honestly, actually, no disrespect to the English casts, I just can't listen to outside of the original language. There's something that's not right about it. And strangely, there are some shows where I love both equally. Yeah. So for some reason, K-On! And Kill la Kill and Attack on Titan are 3 examples of shows I've watched through in both Japanese and English, and I think both casts are brilliant. I could say the same thing about Nagatoro, although 12 episodes is obviously a lot less than the 50 some odd you get with K-On! But yeah, those are examples of shows that for one reason or another, I find them both equally brilliant. There are some shows where I cannot stand the original performance and I feel like the English dub redeemed it. And then there are some where I feel like, in English, we took our best shot and it didn't land at least where I wanted it to land.
Because you've done quite a bit of shows which I have seen actually in both Japanese and English. You had a very small role in Sleepy Princess in the Demon Castle.
Mm-hmm.
You was a Waker. What the
hell did I play in that show?
Waker. You were the one of the rogue ones.
No, why are we talking about Waker?
I
just find it hilarious that I don't know if you follow Anime News Network, and I know that they'll bold a character's name when it's a main character, and so it's eternally hilarious to me that that's bolded as like a leading role that I played when I had no lines.
Well, I was going to say those you had less than 5 lines to my count. It's like, what? Oh.
But I got the screen time.
You got the screen time, yes.
Really good show, by the way. Really great writing.
Sleepy Princess is one of those. I like the Japanese and the English, but I find the English so much better because it's funnier. It's so much funnier. There's so much more energy in it. It's so good. It's like, oh. And the other
there
one
are
is
a couple writers doing some really good work. I know I keep cutting you off. I'm sorry. I have no podcast etiquette.
Oh no, don't worry about it. This happens. It's a conversation. We jump in and out. Don't worry about it.
I apologize if this is a nightmare to edit later. I don't know if you edit.
Oh no, it's fine. At the minute, this is like, oh, I don't have to really edit this. But anyways, the other one I saw was Dragon Ghost House and Tang. I saw that entirely in Japanese first, and then I learned, oh, there's an English dub, and I started watching that. So I ended up watching both. And I do think the performances in that are pretty equal. I do think that the Japanese cast does a great job, and you guys did a great job in the dub. And I really hope they get a second series because I got the latest edition of the manga, and
really?
the arena troupe. The arena troupe come back.
I think I saw you tweet that we revisit, and that's very exciting to me.
Yeah, you get to come back and you join Steve and that. So it would be awesome to have you back on there. I'll just say.
Right, that role meant so much to me, and I've made this habit, and it's something. I say this like I have control over it. It's something that I'm working on. I play a lot of the equivalent of like these day player roles where they'll sort of have me in and I'll be in and out in an hour or two, and that's kind of my entire involvement with the show. And obviously it's my aspiration and my ambition to play roles of greater substance that have a larger presence in the show overall, shows roles closer to like My Misuzukawa Zoe and Assault Lily and Yukimitsu Mochizuki and Skate Leading Stars. I want to do more like that, obviously. What actor doesn't? But Cassandra was very important to me because as someone who lives in this I used to call it gender nonconforming, but I've started to realize that like it's really hard to like I hate terms like androgynous. Not everyone does. Some people embrace it. It's a personal preference. I hate terms like androgynous. I hate feeling like my voice isn't allowed to sound like a woman or a man or something. And so I've started to use non-prototypical, which I worry is like a little bit like, left brainy, but it's a common notion in the entertainment industry. A prototype is kind of like this. It is essentially the archetypes, the vocal prints that we expect characters to sound like. And I've come to terms with the fact that at least for the time being, my voice doesn't fit a whole lot of prototypes yet. And so booking a character that is a traditionally feminine kind of like Marilyn Monroe type of character was incredibly meaningful to me. It's incredibly validating to take a swing at a feminine character when I don't feel like a feminine person, and be able to play that role. That they thought of me for that meant a whole lot to me.
And it shows. I do think that you did seem to have a bit of fun with that. And I've talked to George and Eli, and they really seem to enjoy it as well. So it's good to hear that you've had a positive experience from this, because sometimes you get the impression that everything's all dull and crap and all that. But if you get to reaffirm in yourself through doing what you love, that's great. That's really, really great. You don't really hear that sometimes. It's all the doom and gloom.
Well, I mean, I'm preaching, I'm probably preaching to the choir here with every actor that listens, but, I want to play roles that challenge me. And something that I run into frequently in my career, and I'm probably not the only person who has this experience, but my instincts and my energy is frequently mismatched with the kind of roles people think of me for. And I'm still grateful for the work. Work is work, but especially being someone, and we can decide across our conversation how much we want to lean into this, but like as someone who has transitioned, I growing up and in my acting training, and especially once I dipped into animation voiceover training, and I started taking workshops and more like vocationally specific trainings towards this work, I was always grabbing, your young, rambunctious male characters. I was grabbing your Simone sides from Gurren Lagann, and I would probably grab Bakugo and scream my head off in the booth if I had been training when that show was popular. There are other, like when I watched Attack on Titan for the first time, I was in Japanese, and I love the work that Josh Greeley does with the show. But when I was watching it for the first time through in Japanese, I was reading every one of Armin's lines with the show, every episode of the way. I had the subtitles on, obviously, and I was performing his role as practice as I was going through that show. God, I love that show. I would kill to be in that show someday before it ends in a year.
In how long? Yeah,
I know, dreams that will not come to pass, but so it goes. So my instincts are often very different. I'll come into the booth frequently, and I come in with, in your face, powerful, ready to go, hyped up energy. And then I've got to be walked back because honey, this is just a tired mother. You're not fighting anyone. Like, we need you to calm down. You sound a little young. Can you put a little texture on your voice? And I can do that stuff, but it's so against my instincts that I frequently feel like I'm being asked to flex out of my comfort zone, which is great. As it's great continued practice as an actor to kind of flex your range. It's very uncommon so far, and I keep crossing my fingers. It's very uncommon that I've booked roles that are actually in my comfort zone, and I'm still trying to navigate how to do that. And I think some of that comes with the territory of transitioning, is that, like, there is a lot of, when you grow up with one voice, one archetype, one sense of self your entire life, which I guess I should say that I have, but like when you're always outwardly presenting that sense of self to the world, a lot of the time, I feel like a lot of people have a place they fall back on that's just their natural self. And I think something a lot of people who transition go through that's a little unique is having to figure out what you sound like all over again, and what kind of roles you should be reading for all over again. And should I keep reading for guys, even post transition? Do I want to play in my male range and use lower voiced characters, or would that somehow be like a betrayal of who I am, and having to navigate that? I don't think there's a single role that I voice that I'm not in there, and I'm not in my head trying to fight off this sense of like, this doesn't sound normal. And I think a lot of people, not everyone, but I think a lot of people have at least one place where they're like, this is my voice. And I frequently don't have anything that I feel like is just my voice. Everything feels slightly foreign because of the amount of time I've spent adjusting my voice. It's like that ultimate spy who's wearing so many masks, they forget what their face actually looks like.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this: I have known quite a few people who are transitioning and so forth. And I think you are the most bravest people in the entire world, having to say, no, this is really me. And I wish sometimes I had the courage and the valor and just being the sheer just, you're wonderful for doing that, because sometimes it can be really, really hard to understand oneself. And when you finally start figuring yourself out, it must be so liberating. And so I think you are so brave to have gone through that, because I did listen to your animation reel and such, and I went, wow, this is an incredible range. And it tweaked, and I was like, oh, right, good for you. Seriously, you are so brave for going through that. And it's and I think you deserve all the credit in the world for to go through that.
Well, shit, when I first transitioned, I assumed, and fortunately I wasn't, fortunately or unfortunately, I wasn't hitting the pavement, trying to act as a career. I was working in retail. The recession hit at some point, during / post graduation. And so I was very grateful to just have a job. And unfortunately that led into many, many years of not bothering to pursue acting. So it's not like I was in the thick of it when this happened, but when I first transitioned, I sort of made an assumption that would mean never having an acting career, because no one would take me seriously. And, and eventually I found the courage to move down here and give it a shot. And it took a couple of years to kind of refine my instincts. For a long time, I was telling people all the instincts are there. I grew up in theater. I've been acting in plays since, 5th grade. I have my BFA in drama from Tisch. I've made my entire life about theater, and then I walked away for like a decade. And so I had to refine a lot of those instincts and get to a point where I could safely say I wasn't relearning, but actually say, no, you know what, I'm confident in my acting decisions, and I think I'm turning out a great performance, whether or not I book. And I wish I could say, like, the dream story would be to say that I, moved down here, finally found the courage to give it a shot, and wouldn't you know it, everyone embraced me and it was fine. It wasn't totally fine. I've had a lot of people politely and well-meaning, make me feel like I'm too different to cast. I've had a lot of people tell me, it's hard, some compliment, I love your voice, or sort of great performance. It's really hard to find something that fits, to which, I want to say, okay, well, just throw me at something. And one of the to get a little, advocate-y on you for a second, I think one of the places we misstep with marginalized talent, and that goes for all trans and non-binary talent, and for POC talent, and everyone who's kind of outside of what the industry considers the norm, is I think that, and I will say that I can only speak primarily to a trans feminine experience, but my experience has been oftentimes well-meaning directors and casting directors are quick to say, well, listen, hey, you never know how close you are. When you send out auditions, you always, and this is true, you always read for way more things than you book, and you never know how often, like, there's talent that I, as the director, have wanted to use for years, and I'm just waiting for that perfect fit. And on paper, I think that reads really well, but I think in practice, we see a lot of your more prototypical voices, your coded, straight, cis het female and male voices are often thrown at the wall. We experiment with them. We throw them opportunities to play and flex on a regular basis and let them try things. And yet, for some reason, with a lot of marginalized voices, there's this sense of, unless there's this perfect fit, I can't take the chance, and I wish more directors would take those leaps. And so the narrative isn't, I really want to use you, but I haven't found that perfect fit yet. I want to see people saying, I haven't found that perfect fit yet. Let me just throw you at the wall and try things.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. That's it. Oh,
see where you land.
And again, that's why I think, you're so brave to just keep
Stop.
playing as well. Oh, it's just, I'm here to
I don't want
tell
to be
the truth at
brave. I
you.
just want to, just want to be human. I want to work.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. No, I very much appreciate it. It's it's something you hear, for better or worse. It's something you hear a lot. So I'm over it. I don't need to be brave. I just want to be a person. But I appreciate it all the same. I do.
And it's funny you mentioned Tiny Tina. You were a random townsfolk in Borderlands 3, I noticed.
Apparently, hey,
yeah.
If someone finds a playthrough where you hear more than that one line, I think the one in everyone's playthrough is like, drunk something, drunk Albert was the only asshole here. I recorded like 4 to 8 hours of content for that game. So if you find other clips of me from that expansion, please send them to me.
I
haven't gotten to that DLC yet.
And you've
Joel
been in
was
some
fantastic to work with.
You've been in some very interesting properties, although I will say one of the jokes is most of the people I've talked to so far have also worked on SMITE. You have.
I have, yes.
Yeah, you have worked on SMITE, which is kind of interesting because it's like, that's the one that seems to connect everyone. Everyone's done something for SMITE, it seems to be.
Well,
or Genshin Impact.
Let me tell you this. Okay. I'm going to say this right now. I would love to be in Genshin Impact. I would love to be in a lot of those indie games. There was there's a whole ton of them. I'd love to be in Genshin. I'd love to be in Cookie Run. I'd love to be in there's a number of mobile Final Fantasy games. A lot of those games come out of, and if you're one of the people working for those studios, this is not a judgment at all. Also, please hire me. But a lot of them are working out of indie studios. They're non-union gigs. A lot of those don't come through the agencies, and so I think a lot of them find their talent based on word of mouth or reputation. So for whatever reason, I have not landed on any of their radars yet, and so I hope at some point I can remedy that. SMITE and Paladins, the Okratron / High Res / Titan Forge titles. I've been getting those auditions for ages, and it is one of, I'm sure you've been told this, but it's one of the most overwhelming titles to audition for, because on any given week, like 13 characters will fall into your inbox, and they're constantly working on new skins, and the entire industry gets it. So on any given year, you might audition for hundreds of SMITE or Paladins characters and not book a damn one of them. Weirdly enough, although looking back, I think it was a good fit. They sent out one, it was Dead Not Cupid.
Yeah, that's what I've got here.
The archetype for it originally was, it was very much a Richard Horowitz, like Billy and Mandy and Vader Zim kind of archetype is what they sent out. And so I adore Richard Horvitz. Sorry, not Horowitz, it's Horvitz. And I've trained with him, and I love that man. And I also know that my male range falls into, I've always been a high tenor. And so even, unless I really pitch down into like the deepest part of my chest, I always kind of have a similar sound to him. So I kind of just threw things at the wall, and I gave them my best possible Richard with my own Meli Grant spin, and holy shit, they booked me for it. And it was so much fun. I remember reading comments on YouTube where people thought I was Howard for some reason.
Right.
And I think that's because Howard Wong voices a different Cupid, and a number of the Cupid skins have that kind of crunchy, mine was this very Invader Zim, like, I'm here to conquer. And I want to say that Howard's Cupid was like a goblin who kind of falls into this more like, I'm like a World of Warcraft goblin, and I'm out here doing this thing. And people are like, is that the same voice actor? It was not the same voice actor.
No.
but I'm very happy to be in such esteemed company.
And because just to rattle some off, you've been in Fairy Tail, My Hero Academia, Dragon Ball Super. It's like, wow, you've got quite a few big titles under you.
Let me tell you, my Fairy Tail character is such a strange, powerful experience for me, because it was one of my first. And to this day, it's still one of my most important roles. I still feel like there are definitely a lot of people that know me for Dragon Ball Super, because Catella was one of the most, significant, like non-major characters in that arc because he was the loudest and angriest. And I got to play with so many fun things with that. My inspiration in playing Kitella was I found on a session by session basis that my performance fell into some weird territory between Peridot from Steven Universe and Ren from Ren and Stimpy, with like my own little spins in between. And if you listen through Kitella's arc, there's a lot of moments where we were able to, not intentionally, at least not on the engineer's part, I was able to infuse elements of the performances that inspired me. So, like as Kitella's dying, I had a little bit of, I tried to affect a little bit of that classic Ren anger where it gets that sort of like, I'll show you. And I want to say there was one line, like we actually worked Claude into one of Kitella's rants, and not like as an intentional feature, but I think originally he was like, you idiot. And the engineer, realized that the director realized that was Raleigh Pickens, who's freaking amazing, and I love him, realized it was too long and we needed to shorten it down. So we're going through it going, okay, so it's not you idiot, it needs to be one word. You dolt, you asshole, we don't want to curse you. And I said, Claude. And he's like, yeah, let's try that. And then we kept it. And someone out there made fan art of Kitella wearing Peridot's helmet. And it's like the best thing I've ever found. Fairy Tale is probably the most meaningful, one of the most meaningful characters for me, because again, like Cassandra, like Misuzu in Assault Lily, it's one of the few times where I've just been booked as a young female character, where there hasn't been this weird roadblock of like, you sound too old, or your voice is too textured, or it's too androgynous. Like, just a female character, regular ass female character.
Just regular.
And she's powerful. She's gorgeous. Weirdly, she looks like my old World of Warcraft character. So like, it was bizarre to fall into a role, and especially considering this was pre-transition, and there's a little bit of that sort of like identity fantasy that happens when you create characters in video games.
Yeah.
It was so weird to have a character that looked exactly like the kind of character I would design in a game 10 years prior. And people seem to really respond well to it. I love her to death.
That's good.
My Hero Academia was a weird experience too. It kind of came out of nowhere. It was a random bit part in the movie, and she's come back a couple of times. So I'm grateful to be a part of that. I have a couple of titles that when I moved down here was sort of my bucket list for the things I want to be able to be a part of before they end. And I've checked off most of them. Dragon Ball was one of them. In fact, I remember when I first moved down here, I kind of had that epiphany that I'd spent so much time watching the show, and I watched the abridged series and a lot of the other kind of parody content.
Who hasn't at this point?
And it was so surreal to then get down there and actually be able to be a part of the actual series.
Cool.
My Hero is one of them, although between you and me and everybody watching, I do hope I get to wear a mask at some point. I'm still hustling to try and get, like a proper official named character versus just, my title, the president character. Very fun role. And it's very meaningful to be a part of it. I want a name at some point, so I'm still hustling for that.
Yeah, 'cause I did find it was really strange. It's Public Safety Commission President. I went, what?
Well, and when she came in, we thought she was, and maybe this is just because we hadn't, or at least I hadn't read ahead in the manga yet. We thought it was just a bit part, random official. And then sure enough, she shows back up in like 4 other episodes. God, and the last one is Titan. I don't know if that'll happen. I really hope it does. That would be a dream come true. Because you know what? That show is one of the reasons I'm doing this. I not for lack of love, but I kind of, I got lost in my retail job and I fell out of anime for a long time. And I've said this before in interviews, but so you may have heard me say this, but Attack on Titan specifically was one of the first anime that I picked back up after years of just sort of not engaging with the medium. And it blew me away with how much love and effort and passion was put into that project, and really caught me by surprise, like especially having come from classic iconic shows like your Outlaw Stars, for instance, which is a perfect show. I freaking love it. But seeing how far the medium had come with the way that they presented and the orchestrations and the vocal performances and it just completely rekindled that passion I had for the medium and reminded me how much I wanted to get in there and be doing it. So to be a part of the stories that inspire me, you know, when I have the opportunity to get in there is so powerful for me.
Now, I'm guessing you've seen shows like Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, Full Metal Alchemist.
I'm gonna disappoint you now. And this kind of fits into my long hiatus from anime. I'm a very bad anime fan. I try really hard. Oftentimes you're only busy enough to look at the stuff that you're watching, you know, that you're working on rather. So I'm watching the shows I'm writing. I'm watching the shows that I'm in, especially if I book a role that's in more than one episode. I'm usually watching every episode so I understand the context and what's happening. And so oftentimes those are the only shows I get to. I will say this, I have not yet seen Ghost in the Shell. It's been on my list for like 2 decades now.
So good.
Full Metal Alchemist is one of my favorite shows on the planet. I've seen 2003 more than once. I've seen.
I don't know if you can see my camera, but I'm showing off one of my tattoos. Oh my God, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
You're the first person I've ever met who's actually got the same tattoo. Oh my God.
Yeah. Already.
That's wonderful.
Quick, pop quiz. You don't have anyone's tattoo. You have your own. Whose is mine?
Oh God.
There's only one. I'll give you a hint. Everyone always says lust because I'm a chick, but it's envy. Not lust. Lust is here. It's envy.
It's envy.
It's envy. Sorry, I don't mean to demean your tattoo. I always clock whether they have it in a place that aligns with one of the original characters. If they have it in their own place.
I wanted mine in a different place. Yes, but no, yeah, it's envy.
Oh. Did you know? I met somebody back in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, one day getting off the subway. He notices my tattoo and he says, "Oh, Full Metal, I love your tattoo." And then he pulls up his sleeve and he has the entire scar tattoo going up his arm. It's brilliant. Wow. I have a picture somewhere on my phone. I'll never find it in time. It was amazing. But it's the only tattoo I have, incidentally.
Is that the only? I've got another one. I've got another one here, but that's the only anime one. And
the only other one I've thought about getting, by the way, and the only thing keeping me from getting it is I haven't been back to New York, so I haven't been anywhere near my tattoo artist. But I've thought about getting Damaria's Alvarez tattoo right here.
Oh, okay.
Although it would be weird because it's the same leg in the same color. So it might be a little repetitive, but Damaria has in the same red, she's got the Alvarez crest on the left side of her leg. I wanted that tattoo for years, and it took me like maybe 5 years or so to decide I absolutely wanted it, and then like another 5 years to settle on an artist that I knew I could trust, who could do it. I was terrified because I knew, you know, especially not having gotten a tattoo before, I was extra terrified about like, what if they mess up? And I wanted it to be absolutely perfect. And I just didn't even know where to begin to find the right artist. And then one day I was working late night and I was on my way home. I was working at Apple and I was on my way home on the subway, and I'm standing on the subway platform next to, turned out, I didn't know this at the time, a different Apple employee from another store.
Okay.
But I'm standing on the subway and I look over, and this boy on the subway platform next to me, going up his arm, is like no less than like 5 perfect superhero crests. Like he had Cap's shield. He had like the spiky, amazing Spider-Man logo. He had, and he had like 3 others, and they were all perfect. So it was one of those things where I was like, "Hi, excuse me. Hi, you don't know me. I'm a complete subway stranger, and it's 1 a.m. So I'm sorry if this is threatening. Please tell me who your tattoo artist is." By the way, Osiris, shout out to Osiris. Used to be in Brooklyn. Now he's in Staten Island. Absolutely brilliant artist. If you look up Osiris Gutierrez on Staten Island in New York, absolutely awesome artist.
Well,
also, and I haven't gone to him before personally, but because I grew up with him and I trust his work and his pen, Luke Laporto out on Eastern Long Island is also friggin' brilliant. Google those if you're watching.
Yeah, I think well,
Cyrus
next time we'll
Gutierrez,
go that
Luke
way.
Laporto. I'm just plugging tattoo artists. Someone who has a single tattoo on their leg.
But I've got this one, and then I've got this one. It's
that is gorgeous.
A dragon and a killer whale there.
Yeah.
But this is as soon as I saw this in it was Brotherhood I was watching, and I was just like, yeah, I want. So
you know what? I bet we used the exact same reference because I'm looking at the shape of because I've seen a few iterations on it. I'm looking at the shape of your serpent, and it looks like the head is the same exact.
I think I'll try and get a better shot.
We're just gonna do this. This is the tattoo stream. Let's do this.
Yeah, the tattoo.
Is this gonna be really weird if I like?
It's fine.
I just like there. How'd I do? You know? Sorry about the box on the side. Yeah, that's like dead on.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I had someone, it's so silly, the things that we take as meaningful sometimes, but I remember I was in a deli and somebody told me that he shouts from behind the counter and he's like, yo, I love that tattoo. It looks like, I know this is impossible, but it looks like an actual birthmark.
Oh, goodness.
I guess a lot of people don't go for red ink, and red ink is hard because your body flushes as you're getting cut into by the needle. And so I remember the artist warning me that there was a chance we might have to come back and do touch-ups because like everything turns red when you're getting a red tattoo. So it can be a little hard to tell if you've gotten it all.
That's pretty much what I got to. But also apparently, you can get an allergic reaction more from red ink. And I was like, it's fine. Was
it as painful for you as it was for me?
My first one, this one was my first one. It was kind of painful, but it wasn't too bad. This one, after about an hour, it was like, can't feel it anymore. It was just gone.
Terrifyingly painful experience of my life. And I've had like majorly invasive surgery. And that was the worst. I will say though, he was super cool. He put on music. We had the original animated Spider-Man, like from the 90s. Maybe not original, but like, the 90s Spider-Man show. Yeah. We had that playing on the television set and we just bullshit the whole time. And I tensed my entire body and I put my arm like this, I was biting my arm and I had my other hand here and I was pulling my hair and I was just like this the entire time I was getting the tattoo for like the couple of hours it took us to get it done.
The only time it really, really hurt for me was when he was going back over where he had already been. It was just like, stinks, and
then also because you're constantly was it like urinating? You're constantly lubing it up, cleaning it constantly.
Yeah. And also because it's all red and you were obviously bleeding as well, it looks like a car crash. You're like, oh god. Yeah. And apparently I think my husband will testify for this, but I believe I inadvertently stained some sheets because of the tattoo. Was it a pillowcase? I can't remember. Because obviously it seeps a bit.
I think I had one leg outside of the bed for a little while. I love it though, and it's meaningful for me on a number of levels. I mean, I immediately, when I first watched the show, I connected with Envy so deeply, and I'm so proud to call Wendy Powell a friend now, because I've admired her work forever. She's someone who is a lower voiced woman who has a sound that's closer to mine. I've always said when I think of actors who have my voice, I can't think of that many people. The first person I probably think of is Zelda Williams. I know has a very similar voice to the way that I sound. And then I think of, Wendy Powell and on some level, it's hard to parse because there's a dialect, there's an accent there, but I also think of like Claudia Black.
Claudia Black.
That's kind of a lower kind of I've only heard her do like an English dialect. And so I usually hear her doing that kind of a thing. But it's still down there, and there's not a lot of that. There needs to be more of that.
Yes, there does.
But couple of things. I mean, as an actor, a performer who has to take on different characters, Envy's tattoo as a shapeshifter is meaningful to me. As someone who's transitioned and has had to transform myself, Envy is meaningful to me. And envy as a concept is meaningful to me because I feel like I've spent a large part of my life looking at other people and feeling like I'm less. And I extended that to pre-transition, feeling like I was just born wrong and that somehow like fate had just decided to F me over. And I had to live with that and come to terms with that until, I realized that there are things I could do about it. But also as a performer and as someone who's frequently felt different, I struggle with envy a lot. It is, the biggest, most horrible flaw that I have. And so, I put it on my damn leg so I can remember to not take myself so seriously sometimes and stop to appreciate what I have and celebrate my successes and not always look at what I don't have.
Well, I certainly hope you can have more and more successes in the future. I would really love to hear more of your range, especially as a main character role. That'd be wonderful.
I want to play dudes.
You want to play?
It's what I grew up on, and I feel like when I first came down here, I was a little closeted. Like I was out as far as all my family and friends and like the entire state of New York was concerned, but I was a little out because like I didn't know how Texas was going to respond to a trans person. And I also didn't know how the industry would respond. And I also still had those lingering thoughts of like, I don't know if I'm going to fit in or if people will take me seriously or not. And so initially I just kind of tried to find female archetypes I could fit into. So I gravitated towards people like Stephanie Young, Colleen Clinkenbeard, and to a lesser extent, like Elizabeth Maxwell and Wendy Powell, because I think about people who have husky or lower voices and say, well, what are they doing? Maybe I can do what they do. And then, eventually somewhat out of frustration, but also somewhat out of like, just feeling like I was handicapping, and I mean that in like the video gaming sense, but like handicapping my abilities skill set by just chopping my range off and not doing anything with the lower half of my range outside of the occasional creature or monster like Catella, when that had been the core of my wheelhouse for so long. And so I started hustling for that. And I don't know if that shot me in the foot or not, that I had to kind of make that transition, no pun intended, to like, by the way, please consider me for guys, even though you thus far never have. I think it's been a slow climb on that front. I'm just starting to see people come around. Like I've just barely started to see a couple of directors. Chris Waycamp's one of them. Another one I can't mention yet because the episodes aren't out yet, but one or two of those directors are starting to, and Jade Saxton, and Maddie Morris for working with me on Vampire Dies in No Time, like casting me as a dude. That's incredibly meaningful to me that people are starting to take that part of my range seriously.
You're on Vampire Dies in No Time. I didn't know that.
Barely. Yeah.
Oh, right.
If you look at Draluk's family episode, I think it's like episode 6.
Okay.
I'm the one with the gorgeous braid, and they asked me, can you do like a Count Chocula voice? And I said, well, I can do like a really bad World of Warcraft Draenei. And they're like, what would that sound like? And so I go, I hate improv. Let me try.
What are we doing? We have to go to the Exeter. I've landed on this planet. I don't know what I'm doing here. Oh, let's go out, get our weapons, and go fight the vampires. And
they're like, good enough. Just keep doing that. Let's start going into lines.
That's brilliant.
But yeah,
do you prefer playing good or evil?
I don't care.
You don't care?
I don't care. For the longest time, I think I gravitated more towards passion and anger, because I think that those feelings came more natural to me. And like, this might be like something between me and my therapist, but I struggled. I've often struggled with joy in every sense of the word. I've often struggled with joy and sadness. Incidentally, I don't know how to cry. And I've learned a lot from Richard Harvitz on how to live and breathe and feel my way through those moments and not feel like I have to emote something that doesn't come naturally. And that even if actual tears don't happen, that if you're in that moment, you can still find honesty in that exchange, which is a little harder when you're doing ADR since the performance is already there and you have to try to match it. But I used to lean towards anger and passion, yelling, fire, because that was stuff that came really natural to me. It's easy for me to be angry. That's why my Twitch handle is Angry Meli. But I've started to notice, and it was a weird transition. I came in swinging I call it like my Stephanie Young bat of like every role I read for that was a strong female character, I'd like read myself in the audition room with like, not in front of a director, but like in my booth. I'd kind of like find that energy by being like, welcome to Briggs, the final frontier of the strongest something. I'm being a really powerful woman. All right, going into my lines. And and everything was like powerful, punchy female warrior. And then for some reason, people started liking hearing me whisper. So, I back to back, I booked Misazu Kawazoe in Assault Lily, who is this very soft, like everything was a lullaby or a bedtime story, like everything was like, good night, moon. You don't have to worry about that. They'll come around, they'll see. They know what you have to offer. They'll realize that I'm really bad at improv.
That's okay.
And then I booked GameSoft, which, weirdly started out as in Tome RPG, Chris Niozzi trusting me with a leading role in his indie game. Great friggin' game, by the way. And following up an incredible performance by Casey Mangelo, who played the character in the animated series. I took over the role for the game. And that started off as just do whatever comes natural to you. But we ended up landing in a similar place where GameSoft is very, very delicate and introspective and very whispery. And the gain has to be all the way up to 40 or 45 as opposed to my usual 30, because, there's just only so much of her that she's willing to give to the world. And that sort of led me down this path that got me really interested in soft boys too. So like so I've sort of gone from this place of like really only wanting to read for like the angriest, crunchiest boys in the anime, like your Ed Elrics and your Natsu Dragneels. And I've started to fall in love with the soft, sensitive ones too, that can potentially capitalize on a little bit of my natural femininity, whatever that means. Like I know that over the years, there's probably affectations that I've given my voice and aspects to my delivery that might be a little bit more feminine than they might have been 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I just keep changing the number. And so, I'm starting to see and hope, because a lot of that comes to whether the directors and casting see that too. But I've started to see a place where my work as Misazu, as a soft-voiced, sensitive female character, could kind of transition into some kind of a more nuanced and thoughtful, sensitive male character. I think there's room for that.
Well, there's definitely room for that. It's absolutely room for that. Unfortunately, time has pressed on a little bit, so I'm gonna have to sort of say,
I'll go all day with you. I know you got to get to bed.
yeah, it's just the siren call of bed and that.
Did we hit anything you wanted to hit? I feel like I've been talking your ear off for the past hour and change.
The thing is, I don't sit here and go, oh, I must talk about this. I had little like, oh, let's talk about Nagatoro, and I talk briefly about Dragon, blah, 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 blah. But we just flow. This is how these things are. I just love how these conversations go sometimes.
This was so much fun. And I am a super friggin' quiet person who keeps myself in my bedroom all the time and doesn't have a lot of friends. So it says something about the incredibly positive energy that you bring to this show that like, I'm just going and I will not stop until you stop me.
Everyone says that. Everyone says that. Thank you all for being here. Again, if you like what I'm doing, please consider liking and subscribing so I can continue to make more in the future. This is Kraken.